As Texans ring in the new year, a new wave of state laws is about to take effect, touching everything from schools and law enforcement to immigration, taxes, and even which public spaces people can use. It's a wide-ranging set of changes that could affect daily life for millions across the state. To help us break it all down and what's coming at us, and it's coming at us fast, we're joined by Mark Jones, professor of political science at Rice University. Mark, welcome to Hello Houston. If you'd like to join the conversation out there, you can call or text us 713-440-8870. Mark, tell us what we need to know.
Well, so normally most legislation goes into force on September 1st of odd number years. That's what comes out of the regular legislative session. Of course, this year we had two special sessions, the first of which they didn't get much done because of the quorum break, but during the second of which they passed quite a bit of legislation. That all goes into effect, most of it. There are a few things wait until January, but most of it goes into effect today, December 4th.
Oh, wow.
So one piece of legislation that a lot of people are paying attention to is House Bill 7. That allows any individual to sue anyone who manufactures or distributes abortion drugs like mifepristone to people in Texas. Now, those who take the drug can't be sued, but if you facilitate, say, getting abortion pills to a woman here in Texas, you could be sued for up to $100,000, and that could also potentially affect people who are outside the state, such as companies that send those pills to people here in Texas. It's not
so the
clear
state can
how
sue?
that would work jurisdictionally.
Yeah, the state can sue outside of our state? Do they have?
Well, it's not the state; it's individuals.
An individual can sue.
This law is very so it's very similar to legislation that was adopted prior to the Dobbs decision that allowed people to sue those who were involved in an abortion past 6 weeks. This one does the same thing through the provision of abortion drugs. It's not clear how in many ways, it's reminiscent of what we often refer to as trap legislation that was adopted during the Roe v. Wade Casey era, where you couldn't ban abortions, but you could adopt legislation that made it more difficult to obtain an abortion as long as you weren't totally infringing on that right. What this legislation tries to do is make it more difficult for women here in Texas to obtain mifepristone and other abortion pills if the goal of using those pills is to carry out an abortion.
So when you say distribute, you're not talking about the postman who may deliver the drug to an address, right? I mean, that would be ridiculous.
Well, yeah, they would have to knowingly be doing it, but it's the person who sends it could do it, could be sued, as well as if, say, there was a person in Texas who received those pills and then gave them to someone who then used them. That would be a violation as well, so they could be sued.
And the 100,000 is if you are related to the fetus. If you are not related to the fetus, it's 10% of that, from what I understand.
Well, yeah. So you get to keep 100,000 if you're related to the person of the baby that's being aborted. But if you aren't related to them, then you get to keep 10,000, but then you can give the other 90,000 to a charity or nonprofit of your choice.
What if you're the father? So I guess you're related to the fetus, not the person.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah. So you have to be related to the fetus.
A father would get 100,000.
Yeah.
But if it was, say, a neighbor or just somebody who was watching, sort of a non-relative, then the maximum they could personally pocket would be 10,000. However, they could then give 90,000 to a nonprofit or charity, including one that they were involved in.
Do you think it's bounty hunting?
I don't know if it's bounty hunting. I think the design of it is the overall goal of it is to reduce the number of abortions that take place in Texas, and that's the way that's carried out is one by making some people who currently send abortion pills, mifepristone and others, or mifepristone to people here in Texas. This legislation may give them a second thought about maybe they shouldn't be doing it. So the supply from outside the state might essentially be reduced. And then within the state, presently, there are individuals who will essentially serve as sort of distributors for the abortion pills. They get them and then they help people get a hold of them. that those people may also begin to think about that this is perhaps not something that they want to be doing. So the overall impact would be to reduce the supply of abortion pills to women in Texas. And we know that presently a majority of the abortions that are taking place in Texas are taking place via mifepristone.
So
that is, and that's of women in Texas. That includes the options of, say, traveling outside of the state.
So does that include the Plan B pill?
I do not believe it's Plan B, but I'm not that I do not know,
Because you don't know if you don't know if you have a viable fetus the day after, right?
I don't think it's Plan B, but I would have to look more at the legislation. I know the intent of the legislation is focused much more on mifepristone, so I believe that's the real mifepristone. Those are the real focal points. So I think that would be and it's still legal to use those drugs if so a doctor can prescribe them and they are protected under this. A woman can use them and they're protected. There is no penalty for the person who uses it. So if a woman obtains mifepristone and performs a self-abortion medically, then there is no penalty. It would be for the people who gave her that medication.
You know, Mark, as we're discussing this, over 800 laws have already gone into effect this year from the regular legislative session. We're talking about the new ones from the special sessions. When we're looking at and listening to this type of legislation that is pretty aggressive, would you say the majority is like this aggressive? And how hard is it to reverse this type of legislation?
Well, I mean, all legislation has effects. It's just, what the effects are. So I don't, in terms of the overall impact, the actual number of people affected by this legislation is relatively small. But for those individuals, it could be potentially very consequential. So, with any legislation, there's sort of the overall reach of it. That is, how many people does it affect? And then when it does affect somebody, how intensely does it affect it? This is a bill that doesn't affect many people, but for the people it does affect, it's pretty intense.
See, I would think that this bill would affect quite a few people in the fact that, here we are once again imposing legislation around women's health.
Well, it affects anybody who is attempting to perform or obtain a medical abortion, which is a relatively small share of the Texas population. But for those people who are attempting it, it's very consequential.
Let me go a little broader here on all of this that's going into effect. The thing is, all of us were talking about the 17 propositions that were on the ballot that we voted for in November. How many of these, are these all the ones that are going into effect in the beginning of January, or are they going into effect today?
Well, today we're dealing with a lot of legislation that was approved during the special session. So it's not as many. It's some of the bills from the propositions. For instance, there's House Bill 7 that increases the deduction for personal or for business inventory and property from $2,500 up to I believe $250,000. That's a piece of legislation. I think it's 250,000 or no, 125,000. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. That's legislation that was approved by the vote and will take effect on January 1st, not today, but it's very consequential in that while school districts are going to be reimbursed by the state for the lost revenue, cities, counties, hospital districts are not. So that's going to be a tax hit for, say, Harris County or for the Harris County Hospital District, that they're either going to have to make do with less revenue or increase the amount of increase their taxes in order to make up for that difference. Because while the legislature is keeping ISDs whole, they are not keeping other taxing units whole.
So I guess the bigger point in all of this is when we see all those propositions on the ballot and we haven't really prepared or read about them and we just kind of glaze past them, this is when they start to impact us and why we need to pay attention to these propositions when we see them on the ballot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the biggest one is that they increased the homestead exemption, and that goes into effect as well. But so all of the things that are approved in November take effect usually in January. Sometimes a little early, but normally they take effect in January.
Yeah.
So ivermectin will now be allowed to be sold without a prescription. That's what? Who in the world came up with that? What's the motive?
Well, so they're within the Republican Party. There's, especially during the COVID era, there became an increasing demand for ivermectin and a belief that ivermectin is useful against a wide range of maladies, including COVID, but that it was difficult for people to obtain. Now, what this legislation does, either makes Texas the 6th state or the 7th state that allows people to get ivermectin without a prescription. You'll still have to ask the pharmacist for it, so it'll be kind of like the Sudafed, things that people often use to make meth. That you have there, that's kept behind the counter, so there's shoplifting, but you won't need a prescription for it anymore.
So I do want to look at House Bill 26, which will allow Harris County sheriffs and constables to enter into contracts with homeowner associations, school districts, and municipal utility districts to provide additional policing. Was that something that was not already happening?
That's it was already happening, but there was a threat by mostly Lena Hidalgo, Rodney Ellis, and Adrian Garcia to a lesser extent that they might start to place restrictions on the ability of the constables in particular to sign these contracts. And so the fear that the constables had, and all of the constables, Democrats and Republicans, supported this legislation, their fear was that that the county might be able to effectively intervene and sort of pick and choose which contracts they allowed, which contracts they didn't allow, as well as affect the terms of those contracts. And those contracts are very lucrative for the constables. The constable, anytime you see people out there directing traffic or providing private security or patrolling neighborhoods, those are often by these constables as part of these contracts. And this is always the neat legislation this is something that happens with the Texas legislature quite a bit, is it was designed solely for Harris County. So it only applies to Harris County, but you can never name a county by name in terms of legislation. So it's counties with a population of greater than, I think, 3.3 million is what the legislation says. And that, of course, only applies to Harris County. But this is a direct reaction to an effort by the Harris County Commissioners Court, the Democratic majority there, that was talking about, or at least contemplating, placing much greater restrictions on the ability of constables to sign these types of contracts. So this pretty much just locks in the status quo and means that the Commissioners Court will not be able to affect these contracts in the way that at least it was being proposed by the county judge and some of the county commissioners.
But then I have to ask, why would this be on top of mind for the county, judge and commissioners if they potentially thought there wasn't an issue happening between the constables and the contracts?
Well, I think I think the view was that it could be a source of revenue for the county, or that the county could by restricting the constables would reduce the revenue flowing there. In theory, it could have been something that the county, and certainly all other counties continue to have this ability. So there we have 254 counties in Texas. The other 253 have the same ability to place restrictions on this, but Harris County does not. This is just, it's another example of, with the leftward trend on Harris County Commissioners Court over the past few years, we've seen a reaction at the state level to push back and restrict things. So Harris County tries to do something or does something, say 24-hour voting sites, or try to provide a universal basic income program. And the state reacts, in part because Harris County is the largest county and the most visible county, but it's also the home county of of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and the Lieutenant Governor follows the county a little more closely than he does the other 253 counties.
Mark, Senate Bill 8, the bathroom bill, comes with egregious fines, $25,000 for the first, $125,000 for the second. Who in the world is going to enforce this?
The way the law is set up, they're going to primarily rely on complaints by individuals about the the school, whether it's the school district, the county, the city, the university, not enforcing the legislation that prevents people from using bathrooms, changing rooms, et cetera, that don't match their biological gender. So they're going to rely pretty much on people reporting for self-enforcement. Then the attorney general would eventually be the one that would get involved in investigating, or the office of the attorney general will get involved in investigating and levying the fines. The way the legislation's set up, institutions will first get a warning, and if they don't put into place a plan to ameliorate the situation, that's when the fines can start to kick in. Now, individuals will not be affected. That is, there is no fine or penalty for a transgender person using the restroom that matches their identity rather than their biological sex. But there is a penalty to the school district or the university or the city, the county, if they are essentially not enacting policies to prevent that.
Well,
so
I mean,
it'll really, the enforcement's going to be complicated, but I think the major effect will be that it will at least require these institutions to have formal policies that prohibit transgender people from using restrooms or locker rooms that don't match their biological sex.
So when you say using, can you at least go in?
No,
you can't go in at all.
Right.
So we're going to need.
There are some exceptions, like if it's a paramedic going in, if it's a child 9 years or under, if it's someone going in to clean. So there are some exceptions. But if you are, say, going to use the restroom to use the restroom, that would be a violation.
I was honestly thinking about fixing your makeup. I mean, if a person wanted to go in and just use the mirror and not use the restroom.
No, that would be a violation.
That'd be a violation. So
it's a violation.
We're going to need cameras on all the restrooms in order to enforce this, to be able to say they actually went in and used it. Otherwise, it's your word against mine.
Well, yeah, I think you're going to get complaints, and then so an individual, let's say it's a parent at a high school or a student at a high school, complains that the school has a policy that allows transgender students to use the restroom that matches their identity, then they would complain, and then it would be incumbent on the school district to show that they don't have that policy. So in terms of in practice, it may not change a lot, but what it will change are any formal policies. It'll be very difficult, if not impossible, for a city or a county or a public school or a public university or a city or a county to have rules that allow transgender people to use whichever restroom they wish to use, unless it's a unisex bathroom.
Mark, in wrapping all of this up from your political science point of view, I'm curious, looking at the broad swath of these laws, do you see a coherent ideology or governing philosophy under the 2025 wave of legislation, or is this more of a patchwork of reactive, interest-driven lawmaking?
And it's a mixture. So you have some things like the constables here in Houston that was very reactive to something that Commissioner's Court was doing. But then you have other things such as the restrictions the allowing people to sue in terms of abortion pills, as well as the bathroom bill, that are very ideological. And that's often what we find with special sessions. So one of the dangers one of the things that often occurs in special sessions is legislation that people were able to block during the regular session passes, because during the regular session, the House in particular could block the bathroom bill and could block the restrictions on abortion pills, because there's so much legislation going on and being discussed that you could essentially say, well, we lost track of time. There were delays, but it's easy to hide things and not pass legislation during the regular session because there's so much going on and it all has to be done in such a short period of time. That's much more difficult in a special session because there you have a very limited number of pieces of legislation and the spotlight is very clearly on you. So activists and supporters of that legislation can really lobby hard, and there's no place to hide. And similarly, the governor is put in a position where whether he wants to or not, he probably needs to put the legislation on the agenda, because implicitly, if he doesn't put it on the agenda, that will be seen by these groups as him actively blocking it. Because during the regular session, the governor can say, hey, it never reached my desk.
Yeah.
During a special session, though, if the governor doesn't put it on the special session agenda, the legislature can't discuss it. But once the legislature, he puts it on the special session agenda, it gets very difficult, or much more difficult, for those, particularly in the more moderate Texas House, to block it, because they did block the bathroom bill and they did block the abortion bills during the regular session, but they couldn't do it in the special session when the spotlight was on them and it was too bright.
Yeah.
Mark Jones is a professor of political science at Rice University. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
No, thank you.